It is Tuesday, January 20th, 2026. And if you are listening to this, you are probably doing exactly what we're doing.
Refreshing news feeds.
Constantly. Watching the live streams and just feeling that that very specific heavy tension that seems to be hanging over the entire world right now. We are all watching Davos.
It is palpable. I mean, usually the World Economic Forum is this mix of, high-minded rhetoric and expensive cocktail parties. It's networking.
Right.
But today feels different. It feels like we're all waiting for a storm to break.
We are literally hours away from President Trump taking the main stage. The security is, it's tighter than I've ever seen it. But before that main event happens, something took place this morning that I think historians are going to be analyzing for a long, long time.
I agree. It might end up being more consequential than whatever Trump says tonight. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney took the podium.
And if anyone was expecting the usual Davos speech, let's build bridges, global cooperation, that sort of thing.
They were shocked.
He didn't just go off script. He seemed to tear up the script entirely. We've been poring over the transcript and the analysis, specifically a piece by Fareed Novin from the Global Review, and he calls this speech a normative unmasking.
Okay, that's a heavy phrase, but it's the perfect description. A normative unmasking is when you stop pretending the world is polite. You stop pretending the rules are working.
You just rip the mask off.
You rip the mask off and say, this is what is actually happening.
And what Carney said is happening is, well, it's terrifying. He looked the global elite in the eye, the bankers, the diplomats, the tech giants, and told them that the international order isn't just in transition.
No.
It isn't just stressed. It is in a state of rupture.
And that word was chosen with surgical precision, rupture. Think about what that implies. A transition is a journey. You go from point A to point B. You might hit some bumps, but the road is still there.
A rupture means the road has collapsed into the ocean.
It's irreversible. And his message to the room, and specifically to what we call middle powers like Canada, the UK, Japan, the European nations, is that the old survival guide is useless.
If the road is gone, you need a completely new map.
Exactly. So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out what that new map looks like. We're going to unpack what Novin is calling the Davos Doctrine. We're going to explain why Greenland, of all places, has become the single most dangerous flashpoint on Earth.
And we're going to dig into a philosophical concept Carney built his whole argument around, living without the lie. Because according to him, we have all been lying to ourselves for about 30 years.
And if we don't stop, we aren't going to survive what's coming next.
So let's start with the ground truth. The
Yeah.
context.
Yeah.
Because you cannot understand the gravity of this speech without understanding the absolute chaos unfolding outside the conference hall, the Greenland crisis.
This has been simmering for weeks, but in the last 48 hours, it just boiled over. So just to catch everyone up, President Trump has officially threatened 10% tariffs on 8 European NATO allies.
And let's be clear, this isn't about steel dumping or car exports.
No, it is explicitly because they are opposing the American acquisition of Greenland.
It feels like satire. I remember the headlines a few years ago when this first came up and everyone just laughed. It was a meme. But this time, it is not funny.
Not at all. The source material highlights the performative nature of this. Trump didn't just send a diplomatic cable.
No, he went full digital shock and awe. He posted AI-generated images, incredibly realistic ones, of American flags planted on the Greenland ice sheet.
It looked like a moon landing, but with, military encampments in the background.
It's digital imperialism.
Yeah.
Create the visual reality before the political one exists.
Precisely. And the threat that came with those images is incredibly specific. It's an ultimatum. If resistance from Denmark and the EU continues, those tariffs go from 10% to 25%. He is saying, give us the territory or we crush your economies.
Now, in the old world, the world Carney says is dead. The reaction would have been frantic diplomacy, emergency summits, phone calls.
People trying to find a face-saving compromise. Maybe we lease a base or do a joint venture.
Right. But the reaction this time has been stiff.
It's been terrified, but resolute. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen came out and said, quote, "The worst may still be ahead." That is a chilling thing for a head of state to say in peacetime.
And it's not just words. European nations are actually deploying symbolic troop contingents to Greenland. We are talking about French and German soldiers.
On the ice.
Standing on the ice to protect it from the United States.
Yes.
A NATO ally.
That is the rupture. That is the moment the mask falls off. And Carney used this specific crisis to draw a line in the sand. In his speech, he didn't equivocate. He stated clearly that Canada stands firmly with Greenland and Denmark.
But, and this is the key, He framed this not as a real estate dispute. He framed it as a test of NATO's Article 5.
Okay, let's pause on that because that's huge. Article 5 is the attack on one is an attack on all rule. It's the bedrock of Western security.
And we usually think of that in terms of, tanks rolling across a border, Russian tanks.
Right. But Carney is updating the definition of war. He is arguing that economic coercion to annex territory is an attack. If you use tariffs to force a country to give up land, that's an act of aggression.
And here's the insight that really keeps me up at night. If a NATO ally, the United States, can threaten to annex another ally's territory and punish them for saying no,
then Article 5 is dead.
it becomes a ritual, a ghost dance. We're just going through the motions.
Exactly. If the security guarantee doesn't protect you from the biggest guy in the room, then it's not a security guarantee at all. It's just a polite fiction.
And that brings us to the philosophical heart of his argument. This is the part that I think really stunned the room. He didn't quote Keynes. He didn't quote Friedman.
None of the usual suspects for a central banker.
No. He quoted a dissident playwright.
Václav Havel.
Yes. His famous essay, The Power of the Powerless.
Which is required reading for political science, but not usually for, trade strategy.
I haven't thought about Havel since college. But for the listener who might be rusty or who hasn't read it, let's break down the central metaphor.
The greengrocer.
The greengrocer. So Havel asks you to imagine a greengrocer in communist Czechoslovakia in the 70s. Every morning, he puts a sign in his window, among the onions and carrots.
And the sign says, "Workers of the world, unite."
Now, the question is, does the greengrocer actually care about the workers of the world uniting?
Not at all. He probably thinks the slogan is garbage. He hates the regime.
So why does he put it up?
He puts it up because if he doesn't, he gets in trouble. The shop manager criticizes him. Maybe his kids don't get into university. He puts the sign up to signal submission.
The sign doesn't say, I believe this.
It says, "I am afraid, and therefore I am obedient." He lives within the lie to stay safe.
It's a price of admission. You fake it, and they leave you alone.
Now, Carney takes that image, that very visceral image, and applies it to international relations in 2026. For 30 years, middle powers, Canada, Germany, Japan, we've been the greengrocer.
We put the sign in the window that said international law matters. Or rules apply equally to everyone.
Even though we knew they didn't.
Of course not. We watched the U.S. invade Iraq without UN approval. We watched trade rules get bent whenever it suited the big players. We knew the game was rigged.
We knew the sign was a lie, but we pretended the rules were universal because American hegemony gave us a safety umbrella. We got open sea lanes, cheap defense, access to the massive U.S. market.
That was the bargain. We put up the sign. They kept us safe and rich.
But now...
looking at Greenland, looking at the tariffs.
Now the bargain has collapsed. That is the rupture. Compliance no longer buys security. You can be a loyal ally, put the sign up every morning, and you still get hit with 25% tariffs. You still get your territory threatened.
So Carney is saying, take the sign out of the window.
Yes. He's saying that keeping the sign up, pretending the old rules still work, is no longer prudence. It is, and this is his phrase, participation in one's own coercion. If you act like the system works when it doesn't, you are helping the people who are breaking it. You are making it easier for them to bully you.
That is a heavy realization. It's a call to stop faking it. But this is where I get stuck. If we take the sign down, if we stop pretending the rules-based order is going to save us, what do we do instead? I mean, Canada isn't going to win a trade war with the U.S. alone.
No, and this is where we get to the strategy. This is the Davos Doctrine. Novin breaks it down into two main pillars, value-based realism and variable geometry.
Let's start with value-based realism, because those words, they usually fight each other. Realism in foreign policy usually means makes right, forget morality.
And values usually means being nice and getting eaten alive.
Exactly.
Carney tries to synthesize them by redefining sovereignty. In the old days, sovereignty was a legal concept. You signed a treaty, you had a border, the UN recognized you.
Right.
Carney argues that's gone. Now, sovereignty is defined as the capacity to withstand pressure.
I really like that phrasing. It shifts the focus. It's not about your rights on paper.
It's about your resilience in reality. You are only as sovereign as your ability to say no and survive the consequences. If you say no and your economy collapses, you aren't sovereign. You're a vassal.
And this is where the speech took a hard turn into domestic economics.
Which is his home turf, right? He's a central banker. But this is the part that usually makes people's eyes glaze over, and it's actually the most radical part of the speech.
He connects foreign policy directly to things like interprovincial trade barriers.
Yes. You know how it's harder to sell beer from one Canadian province to another than it is to sell it to Belgium?
That old problem. Sounds so boring.
Yeah.
How does fixing beer sales protect you from American tariffs?
It's about efficiency. Think of it this way. Inefficiency is a tax you pay to yourself. If your own internal market is clogged up, you're just destroying value. Carney's argument, and the data backs this up, is that the economic value gained by finally fixing internal trade in Canada is actually higher than the value lost to these new U.S. tariffs.
Oh, wow. Okay, I see. So if the U.S. tariffs cost us, say, 2% of GDP, but fixing our own internal mess gains us 3%.
Then you are net positive. You have withstood the pressure. He also mentions tax cuts, massive infrastructure investment in AI and energy. It's all about building a fortress economy.
We can give ourselves far more than any foreign country can take away. That was the quote.
And the data backs him up. Despite all this pressure, Canada's job creation is exceeding the U.S. in absolute terms right now.
In absolute terms. That's wild, considering the U.S. is 10 times bigger.
And they have the second fastest growth in the G7. This isn't just a theory. He's proving that if you get your own house in order, you can afford to have a principled foreign policy. You can afford to stand with Greenland.
It transforms economic efficiency into a weapon.
Or a shield, at least. A shield, yes, that is the realism part. You build the capacity to say no.
Okay, so that's the shield. What about variable geometry? That sounds like something I failed in high school math.
It does, doesn't it? It's a buzzword. But the concept is crucial. It represents a shift in how we make friends. In the old world, we relied on universal groups. The UN, the WTO, the G20. Big tables. Everyone has a seat.
And because everyone has a seat, and usually a veto, nothing ever gets done.
Precisely. They are paralyzed. Variable geometry means we stop trying to fix the UN, we stop waiting for everyone to agree. Instead, we form dense, overlapping networks, small coalitions of the willing to solve specific problems.
So instead of a massive dinner party where you can't decide on the pizza toppings, we're having a bunch of focused coffee meetings.
That's a great way to put it. You don't need all 193 UN countries to agree on Arctic security. You just need Canada, the Nordics, and the UK. So you form a tight, deep alliance just for that.
And then a different group for critical minerals.
Exactly. Maybe that one includes Australia and Chile, and a totally different one for AI governance. The shapes of the alliances, the geometry change based on the problem.
And the source mentions Canada has been surprisingly aggressive with this strategy.
Extremely. 12 trade and security deals in 6 months. They've signed deals with Qatar, with ASEAN states. They are bypassing the gridlock to create their own safety net.
But here is where it gets tricky. And honestly, this is where I struggle with the values part of value-based realism.
The China pivot.
The China pivot, the elephant in the room. Because while he's talking about standing up to bullies and protecting democracy in Greenland, his government just signed a strategic partnership with China.
It seems like a massive contradiction.
A huge one. A year ago, Carney called Beijing a top security threat. We know about the human rights abuses, the surveillance state. Now we're partners. How does that fit into living without the lie? Isn't that just trading one lie for another?
Well, it's a very dangerous needle to thread. Carney's defense is that engagement isn't accommodation, it's offense.
Offense. How is shaking hands with an authoritarian regime offense? That sounds like spin.
The argument is about guardrails and leverage. If you just cut ties with the second biggest economy on Earth because you don't like their politics, you lose all leverage. You become isolated. And in a world of rupture, isolation is death.
So it's not about liking them. It's about not being alone with the U.S.
Exactly. Carney argues that by engaging, you create options. You avoid total dependency on the U.S. market. If the Americans cut the trade lines, you need to have other lines open, or you starve.
Ah, I see. It's the don't put all your eggs in the American basket strategy. Diversification is survival.
Right. But the critic in me and the critic in the source material points out a glaring structural problem.
The geography hasn't changed.
Exactly. We were still attached to the continent. You can sign all the deals you want with Qatar or China, but Canada still sends, 75% of its exports to the U.S.?
It's a reality check.
It's the structural weakness that no amount of clever doctrine can fix overnight. So critics argue this sovereignty talk is aspirational. Partnering with China might feel like a strategic move, but is it enough to actually replace the American market? Probably not.
So is it just rebranding? Are we just calling it value-based realism to make ourselves feel better about doing whatever we have to do to survive?
That's the cynical view. And it might be right, but I think the Greenland crisis is the litmus test. This is why everyone is watching so closely.
Because it forces the issue, moves it from theory to reality.
Right. If Canada, Europe, and NATO buckle under Trump's pressure, if they let him buy Greenland because they're scared of the tariffs, then the doctrine is a failure. It means the capacity to withstand pressure wasn't really there,
It means we're still the greengrocer.
just with a different sign.
Yeah.
But if they hold the line, if the tariffs hit and the economies keep growing because of that fortress strategy, if Greenland remains Danish, then the doctrine is validated.
It proves that middle powers can say no to a superpower.
If they stick together and fix their own economies first, it's a high-stakes gamble.
We're basically betting our entire national future on the idea that we can out-resilience the United States.
We are. And, looking at the source, it seems like the room at Davos thinks it might actually work.
The standing ovation.
Yeah, Carney got a standing ovation at Davos. That is rare.
Usually these speeches get polite applause and everyone checks their phones to see where the after party is.
Exactly. A standing ovation from that crowd signals something profound. The global elite, the CEOs, the bankers, they know he's right. They might not be ready to say it out loud, but they know the old world is gone. They know the rupture is real.
We are moving from a world of universal rules to a world of, what did the source call it?
A balance of vulnerability.
Explain that.
It means stability doesn't come from laws anymore. It comes from making sure you're less vulnerable than the other guy. It's not about who is right. It's about who can take a punch and keep standing.
That is a much colder, harder world to live in. It feels like stepping back into the 19th century just with AI and algorithms.
It is. But Carney's point, and the point of living without the lie, is that we are already living in that world. We just need to stop pretending otherwise.
It brings me back to that greengrocer. It's a terrifying thought, taking that sign down. Because once you do, everyone knows where you stand. There's no more hiding.
And that's the message for the listener, really. We are entering a time where strategic ambiguity is over. You have to choose what you can withstand. You have to build your own armor.
It makes you wonder, in a world where the old protections NATO, the WTO, are evaporating before our eyes, what signs are we still putting in our windows out of habit? What lies are we still telling ourselves because they make us feel safe?
And are we ready for what happens when we take them down? Because once the sign is gone, you can't just put it back up.
Something to mull over while we watch the news feeds tonight. It's going to be a long week in Davos and an even longer year for the world. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure.
Stay safe, stay curious, and maybe check your own windows. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.